Fuck, been a long day. Anyway. Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy here at Web Summit out in the wilds, and I have Kyle here, CEO of Huntress, which is a cybersecurity company worth $1.544 billion. So I guess the first thing is, how do I kidnap you?
To be honest, it's pretty easy. This morning you see it's coffee, and you see in the wild of Vancouver, kidnapping scheme doesn't take a whole lot. It's a pretty passive, peaceful place. So
fair enough. Actually, just gonna go kind of off tangent on here. We're gonna talk about something else first. But as I say that, you're worth $1.5 billion, or your company is. Literally, I've been reading in Ars Technica that in, I guess, Europe, they're kidnapping people for their cryptocurrency. So the fact that your PR person is putting this, does that make you nervous as shit?
You could imagine, like, I was a career service member, so it's one of those things that, like, there's risk, but I think there's a lot of ego behind some of this stuff, too. Like, don't get me wrong, most people come back safe. I don't know, would it be one hell of a story to end up kidnapped? It's also...
And then on my resume, I got kidnapped. Well,
I mean, at minimum, that would be a fun podcast, right? But, you know, and the fun part of growing, I think it's actually over 2 now. So, you know, let's just, if I'm going to get kidnapped, I need to make sure the ransom is proportionate to the business worth.
That's fair enough. But you're not, it is interesting, though. You're not worried about that from a security standpoint at all?
I mean, coming from like a life where I was very much tinfoil hatter, I've come to start just adopting certain risks that there is levels. Like, don't get me wrong, like I do trips to Africa solo. So like, you know, some of that type of stuff has a little bit higher risk than, for instance, we're here in Canada. But yeah, there is a little bit that I've always thought of, like, I think, to be honest, the bigger risk to me is peace with the family. There's a lot of folks that when I'm trying to enjoy, it's not like a celebrity status, it's more like anybody that's approaching could have something just as simple as, like, I have a business need I want to talk to you about. But that peace of mind to me is a much bigger risk than ending up in like a black bag in the back of some random car.
Okay, fair enough. So the first thing that I want to give you crap about, since he's watched the show, so he gets this.
Definitely.
So, okay, so I grew up high school in the 90s. I actually went to Arundel Senior High, that is right by the NSA. And so your PR person, again, if you look at the subject line, it's literally ex-NSA operative, CEO of $1.5 billion, where I'm just like, So back in the day, like, all my friends' parents who worked at the box, the NSA, they just went to the box every day. And you said, like, I literally had a friend of mine's father. He was this tall ass, lanky, geeky looking motherfucker, right? And you just looked at him and you were just like, dork. Anyways, it was Baltimore.
I feel seen by people.
But so it was Baltimore in the 90s, and he got jumped by 4 guys, right? Beat them so bad, sent every one of them to the hospital.
Okay, so ringer.
So no shit. So the police come and they fucking arrest him because they're like, maybe he's drugged out or something. Anyways, like a year later, his resume gets declassified, and he was the guy to literally go hunt down people like Jason Bourne, right?
Okay, and so he's
But the thing is, though, with that, all of my friends' parents, they just worked at it. They didn't say shit about it. And so it is interesting that in the subject line, you're an ex-NSA operative. Has NSA just come into the Instagram, the TikTok world?
I actually wish. This is actually a really big part of me leaving the agency. So I started the military life in 2003.
Okay.
And then I started my time in intelligence about 2005, 2006. So first couple years, sysadmin type work. Moved into the intel gathering a couple years after in the military. And it was no such agency, right? We prided ourselves almost to a downfall in being silent professionals. All my deployments, I tend to not put much on there. But when the Snowden situation went down in 2015, I mean, I'll tell you, the single most ethical place, still to this day, even with me in the company, was actually the agency. The amount of, like, mess ups of self-reporting of, like, oh, it wasn't a smartwatch, but I accidentally brought my flip phone into the skiff. You would self-report if people had got out of line. Or I remember situations where people had used and abused maybe the intel gathering and accidentally collecting, like, U.S. citizen information. And there's a whole process on this. Like, most people forget, NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. It's not a local mission. It has to work with FBI. And when Snowden stuff went down and things were, like, discovered, I felt we had no fucking voice. Like there was literally no PR. There was nowhere out there. Like the place that I would gave my life to couldn't stand up and be like, yeah, there's some stupid things that happen. But to be very frank, the amount of ethics far outweighed anything on that end. And I felt hung out to dry. So a lot of people don't know this. But after Edward Snowden happened and after the lack of representation, telling even just a simple story doesn't mean you got to go to whatever I guess my PR is doing. But the point that I'm getting at is it caused not just a hemorrhage of talent, they called it the STEMmerage, not just the geeks in like computer science, but even the math engineering folks. We kind of mass left because not having a story is an easy way to undermine, like when you give your whole life to silent protection of national security, nothing's worse than being like my own family calling me up and like, hey, you're a traitor, you're doing this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, and these are people that like, they knew me ethically, they wouldn't. And this is the distant family that was just like, oh, you're spying on US, you're in my email. And I'm like, nobody cares about your email. So yeah, I think nowadays, one of the biggest things the agency has learned, and folks like Rob Joyce, who is a diehard nerd, he now has one of the most popular, both not quite Instagram, but LinkedIn and even on Blue Sky and Twitter, where he's actually actively, when he was at NSA, telling his story. Jen Easterly at CISA telling her story, and I think there was just so much of this that we over-rotated in the 90s and 2000s.
Really? So is that... Because one of the reasons we have to hate China right now, especially with TikTok, and again, it's interesting. So TikTok, we're told, is collecting all of our information when you can buy.
And we are, right? And it is, but go with it.
But that's the thing, though, is if TikTok and all these social media sites are collecting all of our information, and then people like you are being more public about working at these, isn't that OPSEC going out the window?
I think there's levels, right? Different jobs. And the thing that people forget, like, there's janitors at NSA that get to say they worked at NSA. There's gate guards that get to say they worked at NSA.
Yeah.
And to be very frank, it sounds like that gentleman you mentioned earlier, he was probably doing clandestine services.
Yeah.
There was actually a real need to be very OPSEC focused. But for me, if you take a look, I didn't mention any. I actually only referred to them as the customer the entire time I worked there. And that was both as my time at NSA, then as a contractor. I worked at the customer. I worked at the fort.
Okay. Yeah.
I worked in, nobody ever works at CIA. It's always I work for the State Department, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there is time in service. But when I left, there's a lot of stuff that are just like now that I can say I created implants and exploits at NSA, and that's declassified, unclassified.
Yeah.
Can't say who I targeted, can't say where I went. Like that is about time that we're, I don't know, I think for a little while people just wanted to make themselves seem sexier than they actually were. But if you're in the field, you can imagine OPSEC is real.
Yeah.
Somebody gonna swoop me up, I'm careful about my travel, I don't go to countries that extradite, for instance, or won't allow U.S. extradition.
Okay.
So I am taking still some, but here in with a Five Eyes country of Canada, I don't mind being the NSA cyber warfare operator or whatever PR pitches.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's a rant there, but I actually think you're calling out a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of like the SEALs and stuff too, they generally stay pretty quiet till they leave service, and then you get the Bin Laden books, right?
Yeah, we live in a very weird time period with this. Everything it's like even the agents are Instagramming. So so you have a $1.5 billion cybersecurity company. So just since we got a little bit of time, so you started in the Air Force. So did you? Because again, I looked at your resume.
Yeah.
So you say NSA, it says Air Force.
Yep.
So how does that work?
So even though like size of NSA is classified, what is not classified is how much joint collaboration there is. So to be very frank, like even Fort Meade that is called Fort Meade as an Army base, has every service under the sun, including Coasties, like a John Hammond, Coast Guard guy, right?
Yeah,
For instance, working at Fort Meade. And so my time, I enlisted in the Air Force at 17.
Okay.
I was a hardcore geek. So I grew up in like the Novell NetWare days, moving to like NT Systems. A lot of my first skills were doing system administration.
Yeah.
And so I started as Air Force, purely as Air Force, working for like base communications, managing BlackBerry servers, Exchange 5.5 servers, and old school antivirus. So, from security perspective, I cut my teeth like creating, remember AOL back in the day, right?
Yeah.
So writing punters and proggies, kicking people off AOL, that was like a lot of my first like dabble into security.
Okay.
And then, NSA life didn't start till you don't get recruited, you just get the opportunity to be able to like have a joint mission. So yeah, my entire time at NSA was almost all Air Force until it became contractor 2.
Okay. And so you went to the Air Force. So at least how it was in the 90s, everything changes. Air Force was one of the military departments or whatever. You just went in for like an overall technology. You didn't, like for me, I went in, I had an MOS. So I went in for 35, whatever. So I went in for, but
your ASVAB got you guaranteed an MOS?
Yeah. So yeah, Army, you guarantee an MOS unless you're an idiot.
Ours was as well. Thankfully,
really?
I scored high enough that I knew I was going, but remember like, early 2000s, the word cyber was something you did like in a chat room. That was not. It was not what we call cyber now, right? That was putting on your robe and wizard hat, that type of nonsense going in. And so I did get guaranteed into comm. And so I had guaranteed. I knew I was going to do something IT network administration.
But that was the thing. It's just something like I was guaranteed my MOS. Like you sign up for, and I was literally looking at either Cav Scout or what I did. Like that's literally what you could do.
So mine was at least communications. It wasn't like telco, or was it going to be network, or was it going to be sysadmin? I didn't know that part, but at least I knew I was going to be communications.
Okay. So if somebody wants to do this whole cybersecurity route and they're going to Air Force, is there a way to guide your career, or is it just a fucking gamble on what they send you to?
Well, you called out, right? If you're, let's call a spade a spade. If you're not a fucking idiot, you can score high enough on your ASVAB, you're going to get preferential treatment if they have availability. So they now have a lot of places that you can directly join into some, like even when cyber first started in the Air Force, it was conversions. You had to be like comms or a cable dog, somebody that was doing something, combat communications, and then you could retrain into cyber. And so that's how I did. I got grandfathered into that program. But nowadays, if you've got the chops, got the skills, and you can imagine talent is hard to find people that can, I know it's a bit hype. They say, only 1% of the nation can qualify, but a lot of that is just health. Do you have, and then can you pass the polygraph? And so if you've got all that in a line, you can now directly go into both defensive and some offensive missions in cybersecurity now for the services. And that's Navy and probably Army actually does it best nowadays, even allowing paths to go to warrant officer, which is something we just started as an Air Force, started doing that this year. So it's Army, oddly enough, leading some of the way in cyber.
Okay. So when you go in, you go to the Air Force. So again, looked at your thing. So you did at least 8 years in full-time Air Force, active duty.
Yep.
So if you're already with the NSA, what is the benefit of staying in the military instead of flipping over to, at least fucking before a month ago? God knows what's going on right now, but I'm saying 10 years ago, what was the decision process?
So I mean, I'll be really direct. Like, I didn't have a whole lot of opportunity as a kid, and so for me, like the service, like for anybody out there learning, like use and abuse some of these opportunities they give you. For me, it was schools, and I really needed a lot of that. Like even though I had a lot of this informal training, I had learned C++, I wasn't great at it. So 8 years was enough that they invested in me heavily, and I gave it my all. I had kids, I gave up times, deployments, had an Afghanistan deployment under there as well during active duty life, and I then looked and was like, look, I got enough skills that even though I can go to the commercial world, I was finally ready that I could have a little bit more control of my life. And so I flipped over at that point. For me, the juice was worth the squeeze. I got lucky, I came in IT. I then flipped over to cyber almost right away, 1.5 years, 2 years into that. And so at that point, but I was broke, enlisted. I mean, like, I know some
enlisted in
people,
that area was, you're poor in that area.
Yeah, and then overseas too, like the cost of living never like quite, balanced it out. Like I was poor as hell. And so for me, I just had to have something that paid a little bit better. And so that's when I started contracting directly to NSA on my everyday. And so I did that directly with NSA for another 8 years while doing the kind of 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, plus the couple month like TDYs that we would do as a National Guard. So I got to like write the implants and tools that you can only do as a contractor.
Interesting.
And then I got to actually use the tools and weapons like as a military member, because we couldn't do the certain titles as a civilian.
Oh, weird. And then I saw that with your resume. This is all there on LinkedIn, so you all can look at it. So it seems like you put in quite a bit of time with the military, but not 20 years. Seems like you're off by like 3 or 4 or something.
Dude, you're really just digging in, right? But it's good. This is the best content, right?
Yeah.
So I hit when you go contractor, right, you're just not quite treated the same. I wasn't going to get an active duty military retirement anyway. I was going to get the National Guard or Reserve, which isn't bad. It's still a retirement.
Yeah.
And being 4 years away, but I was side hustling, right? I was consulting, but I was moonlighting, trying to take the lessons I learned on like offense and saying, could I build a product for like people that would never be able to hire my talent? And I finally hit that inflection point. Like I was doing this while at NSA, and they were pretty nice. Meaning I had to have things pre-published and cleared, and I couldn't do many I did like DerbyCon and some of the security talks, but like most of the time you can't go talk about your work.
Yeah.
But I hit that inflection point where it was like, wait a second, 16 years, you only got 4 more to go. My kids were getting bigger too, but I had this company that was growing traction, and I was like, can I go all in? And I thought to myself, like, I could always go back. You know, I was still young enough, and still now, I'm 39, so like
Could you?
I think I'm right at that cut where, for people with the right skills, they tend to make exceptions. I'm still not done. I would actually love to be able to consider going back. Just less about the money now, more about the kind of stinks not getting quite there, getting so close. But yeah, I did. I bailed at 16 years and did not finish my retirement.
Oh, interesting. So you started Huntress while you were at the NSA?
Yeah.
So is this one of those, what they used to do? Was the NSA your first customer? Was that the
No.
deal?
So what's funny is, turns out if you do a career in intelligence, I've talked to a lot of other former Intel founder friends.
Yeah.
We're all paranoids about privacy and transparency. So yeah, I actually don't have any government customers. I think I have indirect, county and not even state level. What's that, city level?
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the whole federal world, no offense, if you ever done contracting for the federal world, it's terrible anyways.
Okay.
But yeah, all I wanted was out of the skiff. I wanted to be able to have my phone, my smartwatch, and to be honest, I wanted to talk about my work. So I know some people go back into defense contracting. If you can't tell, I'm proud of my service and my work at the agency, but after the whole Snowden debacle, not feeling I had representation, I was kind of it was more than deuces. It might have been a little middle finger for a little while.
Okay. So did you have to work? So if you're so I have a lot of, friends, screw the viewers. They work in the corporate world. They're creating their startup, and there's all kinds of legal shit. Like, don't do a damn thing on the company's computer. Don't even respond to an email on the company computer. When you're with the government and you're spinning up this business, do you have any concerns about their ownership of what you've created?
So some people actually have to worry about that. In my world, all my stuff was done on high side, the classified systems.
Okay.
And so there was never a concern of whether my work, because you're working in an area where you can't even bring your own computer to work.
Okay.
And you definitely can't do what you do in the office at home, or you end up in jail. So thankfully, I didn't have that same concern. But I actually took a lot of people forget in an intelligence gathering, it's cool cloak and dagger and they make cool movies, but actually the parts that are sexy nobody talks about is sometimes you end up on computers that you're gathering intelligence that other cyber criminals are also on. They just happen to have got caught up in the dragnet, and we had to do a lot of that of who else is on this? Is it another foreign intelligence agency? That could happen, and definitely happens. But more interesting, I was like, man, look at these lame ass script kiddie hackers that are somehow making it into these systems that having no idea nation state actors are also on. And I thought I could wreck them. I really thought could I use my defense in support, not just as pure defense, but could I actually make the world safer for also people that are doing real, offensive national security missions? Can I get some of these cyber criminals and call it chaff, right? Distractions out of these networks. And so that was part of it. I was like, I know I could wreck these guys. These are really weak hackers. And so you can imagine that was a pretty cool, I got to learn so much on the job that it actually informed a lot of my product roadmap. And that's one of those that some companies, you can't even do that. If you're at the company, your intellectual property is locked up. And Eli, probably the most embarrassing part, my first idea for Huntress that my co-founders and I wrote, We actually tried to submit it to the government to become a product, and I missed the deadline by an hour, and they told me to pound sand. So Huntress actually happened because I suck at RFP response. So.
Oh, there you go. So then, okay, so you're with the government, you're in the government world, you come from poor, you're now not so poor. What?
Definitely doing better now.
Definitely doing better. So what's the tipping point? Like, how do you go from government work to even starting this startup? Was there something in the NSA? Did you meet some old timer? Like, what was that?
No, I fucking sucked, man, and I still, to be honest. Like, if I'm being really direct and honest, like, I knew tech. Like, you weren't gonna rival me in tech, but like, I didn't know finance. I definitely didn't know marketing. I didn't know sales, and it turns out those are skills you need to run a business. So I gave up 8% of my business to go through a tech accelerator. The whole thing, it was like 16 weeks of hardcore 10-hour curriculum, and then usually 3 to 4 hours at night. So when I say hardcore, it was real. And I did that for like 16 weeks to learn like how to actually run a business, because I wasn't cutting the mustard. But for me, that 8% of the business, and by the way, I gave up 8% for $50,000. Do the math on what 8% of a $2 billion company is. They got a great freaking deal at the time, but there was plenty of other businesses that went out of business. So for me, I think one thing that helped me, like the military was really good about being objective against yourself, knowing what you don't know. And I knew I didn't know crap about running a startup, so like I owe a lot. I would still even give up that same percentage of equity to learn, because I was a terrible, good tech entrepreneur, terrible CEO.
But with that though, like what a lot of people miss is there's tech founders and then there's tech entrepreneurs. A tech business is not a tech startup.
No.
So what got you down the route to accelerator investment, like just mentally, like what sent you down that, or did you know there was a different path to even go down?
By this time, like I had a mom that like ran a small business, and she was like being like single mom. She was super influential on me, and so when I had the opportunity to leave the agency, you can imagine the Googles had offers, the Metas, the big banks in New York and stuff. But like I couldn't rally behind that mission. It just didn't seem exciting to me. It like coming from a world as cool as mine, like I have to have a little bit, like I have real bias towards like I have to have a bigger purpose, or I struggle to like stay focused. Probably some like ADHD-isms in there. But what I knew is businesses like my mom could never afford me. So that was the big idea between me and my co-founders. We're like, wait, we all had this, we had all these accolades, we were doing cool stuff in the like the cybersecurity hacking, like competitive hacking world. And because we did so good at that, we were like, what if we built a product not going for the big enterprises who could afford anything, but what about the people who could never afford my talent? And that's actually why we built a product instead of going services, because if I tried to do consulting to them, they would never be able to afford my like hourly rate. Even a really discounted hourly rate, it wouldn't work. And then the cyber talent gap. So that's actually, it was kind of like forcing function of, I wanted to go where people hadn't gone, which was these kind of, we started out small businesses only. And then the other part was, well, how do you deliver to a small business? And I was like, well, you sure as heck don't do it as like me and you. Like we don't scale very well, but a product can scale really far. So if you can't tell, like I didn't have a lot of the answers, but like some of these answers come pretty quick of like, if you're being objective, like you start realizing, I guess I have to build a product. And we were already software engineers, so that wasn't too intimidating.
So what was the initial, so you say product, what was the product? Was it anti-violent?
Can I tell like the most embarrassing parts of it? Well, like, I have success-ish now, so I can tell some of these better stories. So at first it was, we knew we had to like, if you call yourself, whether you're an intelligence analyst or you call yourself a malware operator, it's really from the eye of the beholder. I'm sure in Russia, China, they call me a malware author, just like we call them malware authors, but it's kind of the same, right? And I knew that to be able to do operations and go toe-to-toe, you had to have software on the actual devices. This was 2015, so people were asking, can you go agentless? Can you only use creds? Can you run in memory? I was like, nah, malware runs on the endpoint. I need to have technology on the endpoint. And then what I learned from being on the endpoint, I learned, okay, I don't even have to show all the stuff on the back end. So our first version of the product was an endpoint agent that collected data in a database in AWS, no UI. There was no anything. We got an hourly email that chunked up all of our like trials and customer logs, and we used to just scroll through like JSON in an email, and it was a group of us. So, but that's how minimal you can go to build a company. Because no offense, does the customers care? Like they just care is the output. Like, am I getting something that you're finding? Are you doing something valuable?
Yeah.
They don't care that this thing, like, they want to know it scales. So let's be real. I didn't advertise how janky it was on the back end. But yeah, first version of the project, lightweight endpoint agent, a database, didn't even build the UI, didn't build analysis, didn't build any of the fancy searching, let alone algorithms, ML, AI, nothing. Literally us manually searching JSON in an hourly digest of an email.
Fuck, man.
But we were still finding shit.
I'm sure. God, I mean, yeah, it's painful. So when you say endpoint, I'm sorry, I'm just like, I'm cringing just thinking about that. When you say endpoint, is that a server? Is that a host machine? Is that a network equipment? What's an endpoint?
Yeah, for us at that time, it was, let's stay focused to where center mass was. And obviously I had bias. I was a Windows system administrator. I was also a Windows focused operator. Yeah. So it was originally, Windows desktops, server versions, and we eventually moved to like the POS machines, right? Those are the lightweight compute, right, for point of sale. And that was really it. That's all it was initially. So no embedded devices, not even NICs. And we were all like, our entire back end is Linux. And we didn't even have support. Mac OS, we were like, no, let's just make it truly minimal and viable. Yeah. But it was enough. Most people at the time in that market segment, 90-some% were Windows. So like we were good enough.
So this is a Baltimore area business. Baltimore is a big area, but so I had my store. I had my employees in Baltimore City way back in the day.
Oh, okay. So you were which part of Baltimore? Maybe that's another segment. But I'm curious to hear.
Howard Street. I had my building was right across from the hospital.
Okay, so that's that can get seedy at that time, depending.
Yeah, whatever. It was good until it wasn't.
Yeah.
But the thing was, the issue that I had is the customers, when times were good, they would spend money. Man, as soon as one dark cloud went in the sky, they just closed their wallets. So even like one of the last arguments I had with one of my clients was simply cows just for server licensing.
Yeah.
Like he had 15 people on a server, he had 10 cows. I literally just walked in the door and said, "Hey man, I just need $800 to buy you 5 more cows."
Yep.
Started a fucking argument over cow. I was like, "No, dude, this isn't a discussion. This is just pay me money." So you're talking about probably not janky, but you're talking about just a very primitive security product selling into that regional area. How the fuck did you get buy-in? God bless you, man.
We're being candid with each other, the good and the bad. I got humbled very quick because it turns out this market segment, to call them cost sensitive is the biggest understatement in the world. And so thankfully people are real with me. Turned out to be my third customer, but probably the first person I ever talked to after I learned, like I started calling these local businesses and they were like, "Listen, idiot, we outsource our IT." It turned out an MSP or somebody like that. So after a dozen of those, maybe it wasn't that many, but after enough embarrassing calls, I started talking to these MSPs. And the one that like today, the best feedback I ever got, they were like, "I know you have the pedigree. I know," and like our trial was so easy, we could actually show them stuff that was already on their endpoint. So like proof of value was very quick. This, even if it was adware or remnants that they thought they uninstalled, like the malware, but it was partially uninstalled, or backdoors that they left behind, persistent footholds. So we could show them value, but that was still not enough. And this early MSP, Toby, came and told me, he said, "Kyle, I'm gonna buy a boat this spring. Tell me how I buy your product and still have enough money that you're going to return to me that I still buy a boat. And if you can't, there's the door." And that's the feedback you need. If any of you are crazy enough to go like entrepreneur life, like you need somebody to give you that humble. And so Eli, like that was a moment that all my like lack of go-to-market skills all of a sudden just became like, I need to learn how business actually works and not tech. Yeah. So even to this day, 51% of Huntress's mission is we got to be able to wreck hackers. We got to show that value. But the actual other 49% is articulating what have I done for you lately in a way that you're like, I have no problem writing that $800 check. I have no problem. And so our hard end, we learned that like all the pitching of finding malware or whatever, we actually had to learn finances really quick as tech founders. So my current version, if I was pitching Toby today and if I wanted to win him, I'd be like, "Hey, I know you're struggling to hire tech talent. So I can go with this product and make your most junior tech talent be able to do what your most senior tech talent is doing because we're fully managed. And what that's going to do for your business is it's going to lower your gross margins, your cost of goods sold. And while I protect your bottom line, you can actually add margin to reselling your end client. So you might be buying me for $1, but you can resell for 2.5. So I protect your bottom line, grow your top line, and by the way, I help you with retention. So now your greatest techs aren't doing the monotonous, they're doing the stuff that they really want to do. That took me like, I mean, we're 10 years into this. That took me like 7 years to get that pitch right.
Damn.
So I didn't learn quick. I got schooled, and to be honest, most investors told me I was an idiot. So, I mean, it sounds good now that we're in hindsight, but you like encompassed exactly the humbling I needed. And thankfully, like, we were persistent, right? We knew we were showing value, but we weren't articulating value. So that's like the difference between making a difference and somebody appreciating your difference. Yeah. If they don't appreciate it, like, they wouldn't pay us. And still to this day, that's something that we don't do perfectly.
So then with you guys then, so whenever you're dealing with business, there's like the user, but then there's the actual customer, then there's the person that pays the bills, and there's the regulator.
Yeah.
So you're going for your user, I suppose you could say, is like your mom, small businesses.
Yeah, that's where we started.
But is your customer MSP, is your customer your mom, or is the customer the MSP and their customer is your mom?
So when I started, I tried to make like my mom my customer. Fail. Don't do that, please. Because you can imagine my mom as an accountant running a salon, like, she knew nothing that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, I didn't listen the first like 5 times somebody told me, like, go talk to my tech guy. I still kept trying to sell like my mom.
Weird. Huh. Yeah.
I told you I was a bad entrepreneur, and I learned these the hard way. I've gotten better. I'm okay with that whole failure thing. But the part that became more important, I learned that my actual who I sell to and who I fulfill through were often the same people. It was the MSP I sell to, and then I would use them to fulfill the end customer. And that helped me learn, like, I could then protect one of these outsourced IT departments and maybe protect 250 employee businesses and below. And that, by the way, was our first 6 years of our business. That's how it worked. We literally waited 6+ years before we started working. Now we have customers that are like 50,000 employees. But we started in that whole selling to the person. So we now actually call them, are they outsourced IT and security departments, or are they in-house? And those are 2 different buyers, because getting that wrong, I couldn't even make the like mission difference I wanted to, because I got the business case so wrong.
Huh, that's interesting. So you're going along then. How do you figure out things like the price point? Like, so is it like $1 per like what's like, what is your customer like? What's your lowest value customer? Can I get in at $100 a month, or?
Yeah, like literally we have customers that are under 50 employees that can come through us.
Okay.
But we also, like I said, it's, different, back in the day, like, we're now sophisticated.
Yeah.
When I started, it was what could the market bear? And I looked at it, and there was some like natural, like, even if I thought the service was worth $5, if the end customer could only interpret like, this is worth $1, well, they're only going to pay $1. And so we ended up learning the number one thing we had to do was educate that end client. Like, during tax season, if you want to get somebody who doesn't care anything about cybersecurity, you got to pitch them on their outcome. Like, hey, when tax season rolls around on April, whatever it is, 15th in the US, they want to be able to file taxes, or they want to be able to do tax extensions. And if you paint them the picture, the reason you pay me and the reason this price point is worth it is because I'm going to help your productivity, and I'm going to make sure that when you're in your most crucial moment, you're up and running as best as reasonable. Not perfect, but best as possible. Well, all of a sudden now I'm speaking their language, but when we first started, like, I just had to guess on price. And the things that I learned is I actually started way undercharging because my messaging was so bad and the market was so not. I was just like taking what I could. And then I had to learn, like, these are things that for me, that I'm not overly introverted, but I'm not a sales guy. And I feel actually really awkward if I'm not doing anything other than leading with education. And so, like, having a price increase conversation is salesy. I still don't do that. I hire people that do that for me because I am a little avoidant in that category. So where I'm going is, I just guessed my price. Nowadays we have all the margins and we can work backwards, but it turns out the market will actually show you what it can bear. And then you might have to figure out later that if you really messed it up, you can figure it out if you're a healthy business, at least.
Fair enough. So then, why doesn't Symantec just kill you, or whoever the players are now? So I mean, because you're doing endpoint protect, I mean, it doesn't seem like nothing you're saying is like, oh my God, really? Like, so why doesn't a big player just crush you or buy you? Maybe, I don't know.
So we asked her. I mean, you could imagine like all the haters and all the really smart people were accurately saying like, hey Kyle, there's McAfee at the time, there was Symantec at the time, and even when we raised, like Cylance was a bit of a darling, right? They're now gone and they've been acquired and BlackBerry owns them, but they were the first to bring machine learning to some of the endpoint technology, at least from their marketing perspective. They did it well.
Man.
You know, so the first AI narrative in 2015, but the one thing we had was fact, and that's actually the saving grace is I knew from my job in operations, remember my job was bypassing security products, personal security products and endpoint security products.
Yeah.
So I knew there was gaps because my job was offensive.
Okay.
And even worse, I saw these really lame hackers that were in these same networks that were being bypassed. And so it made me realize like, oh, all the marketing was presenting like perfect prevention, but reality, it's more like healthcare, right? None of us could, like if I told you, Eli, take this medication and you'll never get sick again, you'd be like, oh, you're a charlatan. But during that time, that's actually what security was selling, perfect prevention. And I realized like, oh, I think that what gave me confidence to go so long during these days that were not, like I'm making light of them now, but they were actually pretty detrimental to like have somebody tell you you're not going to be able or why aren't you doing, but I could show them proof of value so quick. Install my software, deploy it to all 50 or 100 computers, and I had something like an 80% chance I would at least be able to show them adware or a potentially unwanted product, and very often some of the more run-of-the-mill cybercrime. And so when cybercrime really picked up in 2017, 2018 and became fully like much more automated and less, kind of whack-a-mole targeted, all of a sudden now I could show value. And so if you can't tell, like, I don't know why those companies didn't squash us, but what was crystal clear to me is their marketing was better than what they could actually deliver.
Interesting.
And most people were just kind of, it's not they had wool over their eyes. If you read any of the stuff like Bleeping Computer or Reddit or any of the forums during this time, all the forums had stuff like install Malwarebytes to do this one thing to find what slips by. We all, as geeks, knew stuff was slipping by.
Yeah.
But the corporate world had such good marketing that the buyers, like the CFOs and CEOs and stuff, they're just like, no, I'm perfect, I've got this. Yet we as geeks knew. So I don't know. I think it is just being a geek helped me like have confidence that we would eventually get the market aware that perfect prevention isn't real and you needed to do detection and response.
Okay. So then as you're going, do you then plan to kill Symantec? If Symantec didn't kill you, you shall take them.
I definitely was not good at pitching because my valuations in the beginning, like it turns out for investors who want to do, they want to hear, here's how you're going to be $1 billion company.
Yeah.
And I only knew how to do sales to say, like, only thing I felt comfortable was what I knew I could do. Okay. And so I was selling very small. I should have, in hindsight, now that I look, even though none of us should become like, don't become a charlatan, right? Don't. But if you can't sell the potential that maybe you could, like that I'm a $2 billion company now, and Symantec is definitely, if you look at acquisitions and things, they are not what they used to be.
Okay.
I should have been selling that potential in my own unique way, meaning realistic, but helping build that. Instead, I mean, you've been to a trade show, you've had people at the booth tell you, like, it's not salespeople are bad. Most sales cultures, to be able to get commission, they force you into like telling stories that aren't actually real. And for me, not doing that with investors meant most people slept on me. Like now they know. Yeah. I didn't accidentally, I got 4 million computers that we have fully under management. Endpoints, servers, workstations, laptops, you name it, tablets. And that's just the endpoints, let alone the other business. So now I got the numbers that people believe me, but because of so much of me not doing that, like telling a better story that I was gonna take down Symantec, people slept on me, and that hurt my teammates, my employees, it hurt my valuation, it hurt my marketing. It was a really long time that people were like, even to this day, people are like, oh, you're the company that helps, 50 employee companies. And I'm like, well, yes. But by the way, I also help Fortune 5,000 companies. Like, so if you can't tell, like, it's an overnight success now, but it was just layered with mistakes of not knowing more about marketing and sales.
That's interesting. So then, since you're actually a multi-billion, you're a unicorn. I think you're my first unicorn interview.
Really? That's
Yeah.
cool.
So most of the time you have these conversations, and you're starting up, you go through the accelerator, incubator, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're getting to lots of money. Where do you go for mentorship and advice once you hit the $50 million, $100 million valuation? When you're long past QuickBooks and Google Ads, like where do you?
So the one part I learned actually even well before 50 million, I knew that even though like you can fail fast and fail often, it was just better to fail uniquely. Like, and if I could learn from other people's failures, so even way before this, very hungry to chase mentorship. So Doug Song and John Overhyde, the co-founders of Duo, took me under their wing really early. Like we're talking 1 or 2 years into the journey, and they were, got acquired during that time period for $2.5 billion themselves. Wow. I had the guys, Marty, who was behind Splunk and SourceFire. I had Ron, local to me at, in Baltimore, that did Tenable, Ron Gula. And so he did Tenable, obviously, Nessus, the vulnerability scanner. Tenable, So I just leached on to different flavors of entrepreneurs. Okay. And I just tried to actually listen more than I talked. I was like, tell me your most embarrassing failures. Yeah. Tell me where you're doing. And what's cool is like, Ron's company is a public company that's worth multiple billions of dollars now. Yeah. But they took like 14 years to get there. And so hearing how him and his wife, Cindy, like, did it the slow route and all the stuff they learned, it actually taught me of like, ooh, unless I want to go gray and do this, like I'm just about to hit my 40s and I'm just at this like inflection point with my kiddos and I'm going, well, I learned at that time I didn't want to do this for 30 years. I'm having fun, I'm 10 years in now, but maybe in 10 years from now I get bored, but right now I'm having the time of my life. Okay. But what I knew for certain is I didn't want to go slow because like cybercrime was moving fast, and even today, this day, my business is growing really fast, but cybercrime outpaces, like if you look at them as demand gen of how many like companies they bring into their funnel and wreck versus how many companies I bring into my funnel, educate, and then help them protect, they're a way better business in cybercrime. That's where investors probably should be throwing their money if we were unethical. Don't take that advice. But, anyways, my point I'm saying is I brought founders who had already failed into my life early, and I'm still doing that now. Like last night, I got together with a half dozen founders to hear their own stories, and they're not all technical, by the way. Some of them are in like commercial drinks, like Olipop and stuff like that. Some of them are in like clothing and apparel. And at minimum, we all kind of like sympathize with how terrible we are secretly. So it kind of like helps with imposter syndrome.
Fair enough. So we'll wrap this up a little bit. I've been having you for a while. Hopefully we'll have you on Zoom. So the next question then. So I have my viewers, and so I do one-on-one consults with my viewers when I just get sad at the end of the day. Thank God I don't drink anymore. So many of them, I get so many questions about they're finishing their cybersecurity degree and have no idea what to do next. These universities and colleges are more than happy to take their money, aren't doing a damn thing to actually put them into a fucking help desk. Like literally, I'm talking to people, they're not even going to help desk positions. So one of my questions, and so I've had many business leaders on, and a lot of them say the cybersecurity degree is actually pretty worthless. Like I've had them say they throw them in the trash can.
I 100% agree, by the way. I even feel like, we require no actual degrees to work at Huntress. We removed even certifications. Took those, and don't get me wrong, some certifications are worth more than others. And even in many places, we have now recommended time, meaning like we actually care about ability to execute. Were you going with like any recommendation? Like for me, I'm curious of how you're mentoring, but for us, I beg people just get the hands-on skills, the labs, training labs, whether it's try hack me or even for me. If it wasn't for the service who took me under and put me in a help desk, that's where I learned how to speak of like resetting people's Active Directory accounts and actually being on the fly and not knowing your answers, and at that time learning how to Google. I guess nowadays it'd be learning how to prompt. That is infinitely more, at least to me, as somebody who's quite literally hiring. My last onboarding session, I brought 30 new people on in a 2-week session. So like hiring's happening, but the degrees aren't, at least for me, they're not worth their weight. And the fact that people are having to pay so much for these, or even the boot camps are telling them 90 days and get you a job, even though I disagree with that too. I think just hands-on experience to me is, I will take that every day of the week.
Okay.
I don't care where walk of life. I don't care that you used to be in banking. Are you a good ethical human that knows how to problem solve and has grit? Those are the things I actually want to see.
Okay. So do you even care about the hacking skill set? So basically my argument is with hacking is at least how it used to be fucking 20 years ago, is you learned how to be the administrator, you learned how to be a coder, and it was a specialty. Like once you become a doctor, then you become a brain surgeon. So like with you, like do you even care about the security skill set, or is it understanding just normal Active Directory and TCP/IP and blah blah blah?
I meet diamonds, folks that are somehow at 17, 18, know reverse engineering, assembly, exploitation, and they are self-taught in many ways. They do like, reverse me's, crack me's, capture the flags.
Okay.
But to be very frank, I still value, like the number one feeder system I enjoy is people who come in our product support team or come in as like junior in-house IT, like those foundations, and I have bias, that's where I came from.
Yeah.
But if I didn't learn learning the OSI model, maybe not to the point that I need to still remember people don't need to see Pamela Anderson or whatever acronym you use, right? The point that I'm getting at is those foundations allowed me to self-teach. And now I don't care where. AI prompting, learning, new stuff of like MCP and where different AI usage and stuff like that. Yeah. I can now pick these up super fast because I learned the basics. I learned core operating system, core behavior. And so for me, I've learned that if you come in humble that way, even like SDRs, sales development reps calling in cold calling, that's like my sales team. And so I actually value technicians and security folks who don't come in knowing it all, but come in and learn the foundations, the tech skills of like not actually deep, and they've actually slow rolled and grew their skills. Growed. It's early, right? Maybe not.
I don't know what time it is.
So, but I guess to wrap it up on that end, I'm still biased towards get your feet in the door with a core skill that actually delivers value, and then sprinkle security on afterwards.
Okay. And then I guess the final thing then, and then we'll let you go to nap or whatever. So I've been part of these like tech communities. Back in the day, I was part of the Baltimore tech community, Asheville tech community. Everybody's trying to be the next blah, blah, Silicon, whatever.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things that we saw in Baltimore is that every time a company became successful, they cashed out and then fucking left. Like I remember Millennial Media was the big one. They cashed out for $2 billion and then went to Florida.
Yep.
Because like the idea is, we help you as a community. You then make a lot of money, and then you're supposed to feed that investment back in. And in Baltimore, no, you just take your money and run.
Yep.
So for you, in your position, don't want to make this sound cruel or make you sound.
No, you should.
Do
you
you actually care about these tech communities? And if you do, is your tech community regional like Baltimore, or is this your tech community?
So I'm a big fan of, like people asked early in the day at Huntress, is Huntress going to build its own community? And no offense, we don't need more communities. We need to be people to be active in existing communities. So like Huntress doesn't run our own Discord or Slack, right? We've played with those. We don't run our own private forums. I'd much rather work and engage like with your community these days and going to the physical side, which the hacker spaces are where I learned. Yeah. But the one part I learned, especially like 2015, I realized if I wanted to make a difference and bring the world's best and brightest with me, I had to hire anywhere. So we have since 2015 been fully remote.
Oh, wow.
We've got teams in 46 or 47 states in 6 countries.
Yeah.
And the point that I'm getting at with that is when we try to give back, we try to make sure that our local people are giving back to their community, but we don't limit ourselves to Baltimore. Because to be very frank, Baltimore's got a lot of strengths, but there's also a lot of like, it's so biased towards government thinking. That's actually not a very diverse thought pool. And Silicon Valley is so biased towards SaaS that it also isn't a very diverse thought pool. If you look at like John Strand and the team at like Black Hills Cybersecurity, they do a lot of the free online trainings and stuff like that. This is a team that they're in the middle of like South Dakota, and you can find diverse thought there. So for me, I am a big part of, if you're going to give back locally, but you have to do it sincerely, meaning like if somebody's not from that community and coming in and I'm going to whatever, like you just seem like somebody that's got a bigger agenda. You're trying to sell something or whatever. And so for me, I like to do empowerment at the local level, but it doesn't have to be my local level. And I did, by the way. I bailed. I moved during COVID with my kids going to university and everything else. I ended up moving to Florida.
Oh, you're in Florida.
Yeah, so you nailed it.
That literally. Oh, okay.
So yeah, we're still headquartered in Baltimore, but being fully remote. My two co-founders are still there, but I said, you know what? I could use some better sunshine. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
So, because that is an interesting, because I see so much of this with the whole giving back thing, and I think it's kind of like, you know, when you think when grandma dies, she's like, she has all this money, and so it's all going to go to you. And then it goes to all these nonprofit organizations, and you get a nice car or something, but that's it. And I think like a lot of these communities and these governments, they're really thinking like, oh, you become the unicorn, you're going to pump a lot back in here.
They
and so
should,
you're
right?
pumping back. You're pumping, but it's going to different
It's very
places.
disparate. It actually it allows us to be very flexible of where we want to be air quote headquartered, and to be very frank. Like that's kind of why. I mean, you already shared, but I'm a consumer of your content.
Yeah.
And I think the at least for me, I don't know whether it was service or growing up, I'm a big fan of like you got to give back more than you take. It's more go giving instead of go getting and taking.
Yeah.
And I've just learned that like you don't have to be headquartered somewhere to give back. You got to do things differently. But for me, it's kind of neat to even like you and I hearing like I'm not from Vancouver. Yet I'm here still working on a stage because there's a lot of like hungry entrepreneurs here that I don't want them to have to hit my same mistakes that I went when I went from zero to the first $1 million. Like that was still by far, me adding my first $1 million was harder than me adding my last 50 million. And so how do I help accelerate that without like being a slime ball is kind of what I'm trying to figure out too in this new later stage of life.
Fair enough. So to finish this one off, again, hopefully have you on Zoom later. So I looked at your website. It says you are hiring. You just said you brought on 30 people. What are you looking for if people are looking for getting a job?
So it turns out the things that matter most, crazy conviction to mission. Like, do you actually wake up and want to wreck people who are trying to wreck, whether it's, you know, scammers at home, people in business, stuff along those lines? If you have that mission focus, that means you're probably a pretty good cultural fit. But things that are more important than that, are you going to add to our culture, right? What do you bring that's unique, right? You don't have to come from security. You don't have to come from tech. You could actually come from, maybe it's you're a second time, second career. You're coming from plumbing. I bet you know a lot about how to make things more approachable to people who are less technical. That type of skill, turns out, it's way more important. And when you couple those with the ability to actually get it done, right? And we talked about that a lot. You can actually deliver, whether it's you can truly market without being slimy, you can truly sell with education first, or you know what? You're just good at customer service. You don't have to be this super elite hacker. You can grow that over time. We do that in-house, and we do all that from starting entry-level positions and actually growing people into that rock star, not only hiring the subject matter expert. So appreciate it.
Yeah, good. Thanks for talking.
Dude, thanks for keeping it real. It was so nice.
All right. See you guys later.